Many of us have seen authentic horrors, secrets, and meanings within the Kirby franchise, all of this being brought forth as euphemisms, foreshadows, full circle endings, symbolism, tones, and motifs. Motifs will be the most mentioned, but that will be focused on later. Throughout these games we see the beings behind the driving forces of Kirby's universe. The same driving forces that spread and give rise to more prospective, hapless, and cursed stories. The driving forces that can take over a character and force them to induce their own unfortunate and ill-fated futures against their own will. Those driving forces being the very embodiment of evil itself, dark matter. Dark matter. Since the beginning of Kirby has always been an extensive and balanced threat, with it being the main antagonist in the entire trilogy, along with being covertly responsible for future events. As dark matter is going to be prominent on the subject, there might be someone else instead who's going to be the main topic. This person may be behind everything the same way dark matter is. This person being Drawcia. Drawcia is a mysterious villain that set his presence upon the Kirby franchise in a rather mystical way. She arrived originally as a painting that would eventually become sentient after many long months and years. Afterwards, she vowed vengeance on the world because she grew envious of those living in the real world. Therefore, she had a plan of ruling over everything by turning the world into a painting. Enacting her plan, she warped Kirby's reality and reformed into worlds within different paintings. In the process, she had even managed to immobilize Kirby and cripple him, something no other of Kirby's past villains has ever managed to do. That was until her own possession, the sentient magical paintbrush allied with Kirby, to put a stop to her. To put a stop to her canvas curse that she's unleashing upon Dreamland. Canvas Curse is of course what the title of the game is, with the theme being related to art. Kirby Canvas Curse has a heavily different approach unlike the last Kirby games, or even the Kirby games that came after. It has a much different unique style and tone, the art style being first noticeable. Instead of cutscenes and pages like the last Kirby games, we're actually given a standstill scene that will soon cut into another picture, all with words sliding down being the only moving object narrating us into what's occurring. The scene itself has an art style that is vastly different. This art style is abstract with white outlines and bright colors that seem splattered down to visualize what tone the image is supposed to entail, such as when Drawcia first appears in the sequence. All the colors change into a darker layer, igniting her presence as a powerful dark being. However, due to this art approach, we don't immediately grasp on what Drawcia actually looks like. That is until we look back at this scene after completing the game and seeing her form. Nonetheless, we didn't know what she was. The abstract style made us assume that everything was just a vortex excluding Kirby, since he along with the magic paintbrush were the only ones made visible throughout these scenes. This is then influenced later on, since the game would over time show us a mysterious silhouette of Drawcia. Each time she would become more and more visible, as if the sorceress was hiding herself for a reason. If you notice, every time Kirby finishes a level, he isn't really able to celebrate and dance around with no arms or legs. This depletes his freedom. Instead, we see on the top screen what seems to be an old-timey recording of Kirby before he was turned into a ball. It's like he's reminiscing of what it was like before. Not to mention, this is the only Kirby game where we don't have any of our friends that we had prior. Kirby seems to be just alone. His only friend at the time was the magic paintbrush. Going back to the art style, however, Kirby Canvas Curse brings an overall different vibe that other Kirby games don't bring. Even the main menu doesn't look like it would be in a Kirby game. This vibe the game brings seems atmospherical and vast. The music even plays along with this. In Tiny Town, one of the first levels, we hear several loud repeating notes that go along with the beat, and even some beats within the background that makes everything feel expansive and homely. Just listen to it. And throughout these levels, the art style in the background keeps changing to different vibrant forms. Ghost grounds have a form of impressionism. Silent seabed looks like a non-objective art style. Collapsed castle seems to have more of a pattern style along with some 3D elements. The music just brings these backgrounds to life, much like how Drawcia wants to be brought to life from being trapped in a painting. Why does this all matter though? What does this have to do with anything? Well, let's go back to Drawcia. She was the one who created these worlds within these paintings. She was the one who designed these levels. She was the one who created everything in the game. She even made Kirby into her own creation, and the magic paintbrush was originally her possession. She herself cursed everything onto a canvas. The canvas curse. Drawcia was the creator and designer of the game itself. Eventually, DDD and previous enemies arrive, but they're not actually real. They're illusions created by Drawcia. As mentioned before, when Drawcia creates them, she appears as a silhouette, making her somewhat divine presence more mysterious. Each time you pass through a boss, she becomes more visible and visible. And each time, mystical and odd music play and soon converting into a complete incomprehensible static. The last world we arrive in is called the world of Drawcia, the overall world in which Drawcia wanted to create, what Drawcia truly views as art. In this world, we are given a distinct layer of darkness, a dimension full of utter gloom, an absence of light along with creepy jagged patterns within, rolling through to what seems to be rows of paintings that stare with demented and creepy smiles. Alongside, we are also greeted with freakish music. Then, you for some reason realize something. That something is familiar with this place. This place is where a matter most dark would manifest in. This world is what the Hyperzone would have been. This world is what would have been the universe if Zero Two succeeded. Drawcia. She continued Dark Matter's footsteps and actually brought about an entire world out of it. Finally, we enter a portrait portal into where Drawcia domains. With pure white in the background and a multicolored ground, we once again see Drawcia's silhouette float down. Then, we ultimately see who exactly we're fighting against, as she reveals herself. The background turns into a multitude of colors that look like a swarm of watery paint. Notice, this is the first time the background actually moves. The music that plays sounds as if you're now on a higher plane of existence. Witness the divine being of Drawcia, the being who is going to change the world into her own twisted image. However, you refute as you attack with your rainbow bridges and your stylus. For you, the player directs Kirby the magic paintbrush. Drawcia gives a maniacal laugh and paints bridges to life. However, Kirby quickly punts her in a series of fights and finally takes her down. Drawcia rapidly shakes her over and it looks as if she exploded, but instead, she goes completely nude and stares at the screen as she realizes who the real threat is. As the screen shakes and the background goes crazy, she just laughs as her body forms into a giant ball. Everything goes white, and soon her laugh slowly whispers back in as it turns into a distorted, monstrous laugh. You witness her true form, Drawcia Soul, the first Soul boss in the Kirby franchise. Drawcia at this point now realizes the true threat. It's not Kirby. It's not the magic paintbrush. There's someone else. There's someone else who she hasn't created or influenced. There's someone out of her control. Someone that isn't in the game she created. It's you, the player. Drawcia is now unhinged and ballistic as she rapidly bounces around and teleports as a ball of paint with 5 eyes. The background moves around and suddenly changes each time Drawcia attacks as if you're in a vortex. The map on the tap screen is nothing but static. She produces and gruesomely detaches single-eyed creatures from her body, looking as if it harmed her in the process. Knowing Kirby can't take all of them at once, she waits and sees if you, the player, can stop them. If you do, then she screeches at the screen as if she's actually fighting you. Each time you tap her with your stylus, she continues to scream and screech at you. Drawcia now knows that there is another real world out there, and is envious that you, the player, the one preventing her from making her own world to live in, gets to live in the actual real world. It's the same way on how she first vowed vengeance and was jealous of people living outside her original painting. And now, with you here, it's like that all over again. She's vowing vengeance on you. Drawcia, after going on an entire rampage, finally gets taken down by the player. All of those worlds she turned into paintings appear in the background. She then lets off one last scream of envy and hatred at you, as she then gets sealed back into the single, motionless painting she originated from. Said painting shatters until there isn't a shred of it left. The entire world reverts back to normal, leaving Kirby and a magic paintbrush to rejoice. Drawcia is the most aware villain that Kirby has ever faced. Drawcia wasn't just directly concerned about Kirby nor the magic paintbrush. Sure, many other characters may have to.for awareness, but Drawcia actually carries a personal vendetta towards the player, even though she had just only met them. Maybe after living in a painting for so long, she developed a supernatural vision of higher layers of existence. That being said, if Drawcia was a painting that eventually came to life, then who was the person that painted her? In Kirby, there have been many artists that have the power to bring their own creations to life. If that is so, then who's the one that created Drawcia? We actually learn in a much later game that Drawcia wasn't the only painting born. In Kirby Triple Deluxe, there is another sorceress within the painting named Paintra. In the pause-screen description of Paintra, it tells us this. There was once a painting said to depict a pair of sisters separated at birth. It slept unnoticed in the painter's studio for countless years before it came to life and vowed revenge on the world. This could mean that Paintra is Drawcia's younger sister. But that doesn't tell us anything about the actual painter themselves. But next, in another pause-screen description of Paintra, it tells us this. Born from a forgotten painting made by a mysterious brush, Paintra DX has come to take her revenge. One must wonder if the painter who created her regrets giving her form. It may have been the magic paintbrush since the painting was made by a mysterious brush. And the magic paintbrush would regret creating them too, since it was the one who allied with Kirby to put a stop to Drawcia in the first place. However, this isn't likely since the description also refers to the painter. This would mean that the painter themselves created them with the use of the mysterious paintbrush. So we are brought with two people that could have been the artist. One being Paint Roller. He can certainly bring paintings to life, but never to the extent of bringing out a powerful being like Drawcia. The creature he brings to life seem very mundane and insignificant. And besides, Drawcia and Painter were created with a paintbrush, while Paint Roller uses a crayon. The next one is Aline. Aline doesn't really paint creatures to life on her own. She actually rather paints colors onto a lifeless object to bring them to life. If anything, Drawcia had to have already been sculpted by another person. And the pause screen already refers to the individual as a singular painter. There is only one other artist that could have painted Drawcia. This person is the most likely to be the painter. After seeing how twisted and dark Drawcia was, it would make sense to how she came that way if this person did paint her. This person has seen the likes of Drawcia's cold and dark vision even before she was made. This person has went to the depths of the pitch black and infinite void, against their own will. This person being forced to induce or rather paint their own unfortunate and ill-fated futures, against their own will. This person is Adeline. Adeline was the first significant painter to be focused on in the Kirby series. She was one of the heroes to be helplessly under Dark Matter's influence, and also being one to attempt to put an end to Dark Matter afterwards. She would certainly regret accidentally birthing a new greater evil force, such as Drawcia. But how did this all happen? How did Adeline create such a supernatural being full of wickedness? Maybe it wasn't Adeline herself. Maybe it was a being who was already supernatural and full of wickedness. During Dark Matter's reign, she had eventually become victim towards Dark Matter, by being directly under control of them. Maybe it was Dark Matter who actually brought forth Drawcia through Adeline's abilities. Adeline first appeared in Kirby's Dreamland 3, which was 2 games before Canvas Curse. In Dreamland 3, she was one of the bosses that was also possessed by Dark Matter. It was somewhere within this time where she made Drawcia's painting under Dark Matter's influence. She then left it in her own studio. Months and years later, from 64 and An Amazing Mirror, Drawcia soon came to life in Canvas Curse. But this isn't all that's going to be mentioned here. Let's dive in much deeper. Let's go into more areas of lore. Let's find out who Drawcia actually is and why she's the most important character. Let's go into Void Termina. That's right, we're skipping all the way up there. In the Japanese description of Void, it states this: dreams, darkness, soul, heart. All chaos and possibilities assemble within its substance, being born as the origin and ancestor of all. Void Termina isn't just the origin of Kirby and Dark Matter, it is the origin of all matter, whereas some matter could be good, dark, or in between. Void Termina after birth is absolutely everything that exists in the universe. Void is omnipresent, hence why the English version states that Void exists in all dimensions. Void being the parent of all matter would mean that everything in the universe is somewhat related to one another. This goes into the next subject, soul. Everything in Kirby contains a living soul. These souls either reflect good or evil. Once again on the pause screen, there's something that is concisely stated. Dreams, darkness, soul, heart. All chaos and possibilities assemble within its substance. In Star Allies, when Void was reborn, it was going to be reborn as a matter that possesses a soul. Then it would have been precededly chosen if that matter had its soul reflect good or evil, depending on how Void was being treated. Good and evil are the dominant entities that Void rebirths into. But also keep in mind that Void is also the origin of everything. Going into Zero, which is the dominant evil embodiment in the universe reborn by Void. Dark Matter, or Zero, is a powerful being that is ultimately harmed by the essence of happiness and anything that shines heavenly. They are evil brought to life, all in one form. Void being the one that brings forth Zero after being influenced with negative emotions. Void goes through specific phases before it's ultimately decided what it will turn into. After a certain amount of time, it eventually gave in another phase called Void Soul, essence of chaos. Drawcia, who again is the first and only canonical soul boss in Kirby. The other soul bosses, though being non-canon, they contain a remarkable trend. Notice, they all at one point melt into a ball of paint, like Drawcia. They also have the same attacks as Drawcia. Now remember, Drawcia is a physical incarnation of Dark Matter's vision, considering Dark Matter created her. Let's take a step back. Let's take a look at all these other soul bosses first. Mark's soul is supposed to be Mark's inner evil brought to life. Soul of Sectonia is Sectonia going ballistic because she's to the point where she becomes so unhinged and obsessed where she can't remember anyone, not even herself. These souls reflect evil within the person. They are the chaotic possibilities that Void Soul rebirths. One of the most noticeable qualities in their paint attacks is that they are usually pink and blue. One thing that is really concerning is that all of Void's phases contain some form of Drawcia's attacks. Why would Drawcia be associated with Void? That's not all. When you encounter Astral Birth Void, the final phase when its reincarnation is truly decided, Void's splash screen is Zero's hyperzone from Dreamland 3, hinting that Void is undoubtedly going to be reborn as Dark Matter. However, the other phase prior, Void Soul, shows a different splash screen. It's that same pink and blue. Okay, so let's review everything that was just said. A negative void termina goes through these specific phases before it's decided when it will ultimately be emerged as dark matter, because void's emotions are being changed gradually. A negative void termina is also the future of all chaotic possibilities, since it's the origin of all living things. Void soul, one of the starting phases, is named as the essence of chaos. The origin of all souls would embody and originate upon living things that contain evil souls, such as the soul bosses. An evil soul is an individual's essence of chaos within them. Dark matter, which is pure and raw evil brought into physical form, paints Drawcia, her soul being an incarnation of dark matter's own view. So in this case, Drawcia's soul, which in Japanese text is actually named her true form, that stemmed from the painting, is the closest thing to being a form of dark matter. Now the remaining question is, why do these forms of Drawcia's soul appear in these sequences? Why do these motifs keep happening? Let's get realistic here. Everyone is different in their own unique ways. We all have our flaws. We all have our ups and downs. We all have some sort of mischief or badness within ourselves. Nobody is truly good. Nobody is perfect. We aren't Kirby. We aren't an incarnation of pure virtue and morality. But even then, one can still have their flaws and downs. One can be a little naive sometimes. But when a person starts to slowly change and turn bad, they start to not be themselves anymore. Their loss of innocence and personality is shifted, and they lose sight of who they are or who they were, because at that point, they had become a different person. The more immoral and wicked they get, the more they distance themselves away from their former selves. Their qualities and personalities are nearly entirely drained. They become a void. But their qualities aren't fully drained yet. Some qualities are still there, whatever it is. They still have a soul, but let's just say they have a void soul. So what these soul bosses are, they're the representation of a person slowly losing themselves. Their previous soul is gone, so they have a void soul to hold whatever there is of them. Marx, who was evil from the very start, he still had his own significant distinct qualities, but his soul form showed his appearance shift. Marx's soul, unlike Marx's true form, shows that his fangs had grown. His face looks like it drastically lost weight as if he's been fasting. His skin looks shot. It's an extreme purple instead of lavender. His pupils are more crazed. His gesture shoes are sharp. He now wears a chain instead of a bow tie. His wings are wider and has more sharper fangs, and it's a bright red unlike his previous yellow wings, and instead of his cheeky voice, he now owns a deep, monstrous voice. It's like if Mark's soul is a grown-up version of Mark's that is more demented. He isn't what he used to be. A cheeky, psychotic juvenile that used to wear bow ties is now turned into a grown, monstrous fiend that wears chains as if he's old enough to start drinking. Soul of Sectonia is more profound. She became so obsessed with herself and constantly changed her physical appearance. However, after she collapsed, she goes ballistic. She rips her head from the dreamstalk, and at this point she can't perceive anything anymore. She's confused. She's changed herself so many times, she distanced herself away from her former self that she can't even remember who that person was. These soul bosses were actually people with their own qualities before they turned into what they turned into. They gradually became more vile. They became more distant from their former selves and changed into something else. Their own matter merges into something darker, bit by bit. They soon form into a ball of paint, the first phase. Eventually, their soul becomes entirely heartless and become a void of darkness. They turn into dark matter itself, pure and raw evil. Your evil soul, or your void soul becoming sadly and more exponentially evil, is when your essence of chaos grows more apparent. So apparent that your physicality, your own matter starts changing, and you just begin to lose yourself. The first phase of change, as a ball of paint that is a preliminary husk of the next phase. Then, when you're far enough towards evil, the final phase, you lose yourself. You lose yourself entirely. Your mind, your soul, everything that made you you, and you become dark matter. You become the emptiness that once held your innocence. You become void. You become zero. We go through the same evil phase as void does. We originate from void. The more evil and dark we become, the more we change, and the more we become dark matter. Drawcia's soul is supposed to represent the exact moment when we start shifting and losing ourselves, to the point where we start changing. And that's why Drawcia is one of the most important characters. That being said, there are other soul bosses that don't have Drawcia's physicality, such as Mogalor's Soul and Startheme Soul OS. The thing is, unlike Marx and Sectonia, Mogalor was directly merged into dark matter. Not just dark matter, but Zero itself, the pinnacle of it. Besides, Mogalor's soul isn't actually Mogalor's soul, it's just a manifestation of the crown. It's not a soul boss. The other soul boss is Startheme Soul OS, as in which it doesn't show any of Drawcia's attacks. It doesn't even form itself into a ball of paint. Well, Stardream isn't exactly an organic living being. Stardream wasn't really born by Void. It was created artificially considering it's a machine. However, if Stardream is so powerful and has a sentient mind of its own, to the point where it views all life as weak and insignificant, that would definitely mean that it has a soul. And it shows that a part of Drawcia is still within it. Pink and blue. There's another thing worth mentioning. Phase 2 of Void Terminus states this: hatred, obsession, jealousy, greed. The darkness gathered by Highness has transformed into a corrupt power within Void Termina that conflicts with his newly forged soul. Chaos descends. Notice that these are all the soul bosses. Hatred. Marx has an odd vindictive hatred towards Popstar to the point where he wanted to cause utter chaos upon it. Obsession. Sectonia was so obsessed with herself to the point where she lost her mind. Jealousy. Drawcia was jealous of those living in the real world, so she vowed vengeance. Greed. Stardream was influenced through Haltman's mind, whose only goal was infinite prosperity for his company. This is why Stardream saw living things as insignificant, since Haltman remorselessly stole from indigenous life. The qualities that show within these bosses' evil souls eventually turn into Drawcia's soul, the Void Soul, the essence of chaos that embodies within.